Hey class, pretty big day in sports in Texas yesterday. UTSA seems to have kept its Coach Trailer, for until 2031. We'll see if that um, happens or not, but I'm very happy that he's staying. He seems to be an excellent coach. He's really turned things around. UTSA is ranked, I think, 16th in the country. It's a really big deal. Um, it just brings such good attention to UTSA. I think it just helps for most students, makes people feel better about UTSA. It puts a little shine on UTSA's reputation, on its degree. I think we'll have applications rising to come to UTSA. It costs a fortune, but honestly, it's worth it. Notre Dame, it's built on football, especially beginning in the 1920s. And I have a lot of friends that wish sports weren't such a big deal. And intercollegiate athletics weren't such a big deal, especially football. But let's face it, that's the reality. And then last night, if you're an Astros fan, they came back from 4-0, and they won. So now it's 3-2. They still have two more games, but at least they stayed alive. Very exciting, very typical Astros game. So a good day yesterday. So I want to talk briefly about the reading for today, or for this week, and the podcast, and also Gwen. What's happening is Gwen doesn't write the book strictly chronologically. So you're beginning with chapter 1 and chapter 2. I think chapters 1 through 4 you're reading. So he begins with the kidnapping of some Anglos, including the Parker homestead. And he talks about those experiences. And that's why I've saved these chapters until now, because if you'd read them in September, it would not have made any sense. So one of the things I want to emphasize, and I have a map of the Comancheria up, and I'll post it on the module. Kidnapping children was very, very much part of the Comanche life in Comanche society. And the same was true of other Plains Indians. The Comanche, they would kidnap children in order to restore their population at times. Also, it was part of the Comanche economy, because the Comanche would trade children, trade them back into both the Mexican and the Anglo world, for all kinds of goods. In Mexico, there used to be annual fairs where Comanche come in with their captives. And in the council house fight, which I'm going to talk again about in these podcasts, I think the Comanche came to San Antonio expecting to trade the children that they had held captive, but it went the other way, and the captives end up getting killed. So I want to stress that the Comanche, first of all, they kidnapped Mexican children, and they continued to kidnap children from Mexico. If you look at this map, the Comanche raiding zone went deep into what's now northeastern Mexico. It's incredible the distances the Comanche used to travel. They used to go all the way from the middle of Oklahoma, southern Kansas, northern New Mexico, deep into what's now Mexico. And the reason for that is that these areas of Mexico, especially Chihuahua, were more populated during this period than other regions in Texas. But they used to raid Santa Fe. They used to raid Taos. They'd raid New Mexico villages. It was really tough. So what you're going to be reading about today are some of the famous Comanche captivity raids. And they're famous because some of the folks that were captured, the children, the adolescents, really came back and wrote accounts of what their experience was like. So if you were to be kidnapped, probably if you wanted to survive, if you were an adult, you would be killed almost without a doubt, and tortured and killed. Gwyn it does not romanticize the Comanche. The Comanche were very tough. They were very tough on their enemies. They were expert at torture. And so if you were an adult, probably 16, 17 years or older, you would be killed. And if you were a female, you would probably be sexually assaulted. It was tough. It was really, really tough for settlers. If you were a baby, you'd be killed too, because you were just too much trouble. So the best age to survive being kidnapped by the Comanche would have been from about 6, 7, 8 to about 13, 14, 15, before puberty, because you would be flexible enough to join the Comanche world. Now, if you were male and you survived the initial rituals of Comanche life, being a Comanche can be a lot of fun, actually. You're riding around a horse, you're raiding, we have some captivity narratives of some young men that were captured and then they were returned to the Anglo world. And always loved the Comanche, always felt more Comanche than they did Anglo. They crossed over to the other side psychologically. For women, it was a much tougher story. Again, the threat of sexual assault was always there. And also, life for women in the Comanche world was very, very difficult. Women did most of the basic chores, the cooking, some of the gathering, packing. The Comanches, of course, are nomadic. They're always on the move. It was a difficult life for Comanche women, and especially for captives. And we know a fair amount about this life, again, because of the captivity narratives that you're going to read about this week. So it's a fascinating insight into a world that's not that far away. My grandmother was born in 1900, and she had a relative, an uncle that was scalped in the 1870s. She was from Llano, she's from Hill Country, and he actually survived, which is kind of incredible to think about. So even in my grandmother's time, she knew somebody that had survived a Comanche attack. And again, the Comancheria basically stretched from about 1604, from about the UTSA main campus, north and west, Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, the eastern half of New Mexico, into Colorado. Again, there were 12 bands of Comanches. They spoke basically the same language. They fought everybody except for themselves. So again, for this week, what you're going to be reading about is the war, really, between the Comanche and Anglos in Texas. This war also occurred outside of Texas, but we're going to focus on Texas, with the reminder that in Northwest Texas, the Comanche were the most powerful force probably until the 1870s. The Comanche dominate the area north and west of San Antonio into New Mexico from about the 1720s to about the 1870s. Of course, they have some ups and downs, but for almost a century and a half. And it's really incredible to think about. And it's quite fascinating. So that's what you're going to be reading about this week. Next week, you'll be watching a movie called The Searchers, and I'll talk about that next week. It's on the syllabus. I ask you to rent it on YouTube, or it's only like $2.99. It's a pretty amazing movie. I won't make you watch the whole thing. I'll tell you what I want you to watch, but it's a exploration of what happens once an Anglo woman, young girl, gets kidnapped by a Comanche in the search for her. So this week begins a 2-week focus on the Comanche in Texas, and the kidnapping of Anglo children, and what came of that, what their memories were, what their description of the Comanche life was, and the attempts on the part of Anglo-Texans to suppress the Comanche, which they really don't do. And ultimately, it's not going to be until the 1870s that the U.S. Army comes down here under General McKenzie, and the Comanche are finally forced into Oklahoma.